Hey guys, tonight we slip into the scorching New Mexico desert as you trudge toward a rust-speckled RV parked like a forgotten relic beneath the unrelenting sun. You probably won't survive this without questioning every choice you've ever made, and that's before you even hear the words cancer and meth lab. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to drop your location and local time in the comments so we can all feel like we're somewhere less dry than the Albuquerque Basin. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Section 1. Desperate Genesis. You stand beside Walter White as he hears the words, "inoperable lung cancer," echo in his sterile doctor's office. In 2007, the 5-year survival rate for stage 3 lung cancer hovered around 16%, a chilling fact that settles in your chest like a lead weight. Historians still argue whether Walt's diagnosis would have come earlier if he'd had better health coverage, but you feel the hopeless urgency regardless. Your breath catches when he grabs a crumpled lab coat from his high school teaching days, the same one that smells faintly of chalk dust and old cafeteria experiments. You can almost taste the chalkboard shavings in the air, a sensory hitch that wrenches you from the present. He marches through the halls of J.P. Wynne High School like a ghost, a fringe chemist who once mentored science fair hopefuls and now counts his days in pill bottles. You probably won't survive this without a stiff drink, but hold off, you're only at the start. As he rounds corners, chalkboard formulas swirl in your vision. Did you know some DIY lab enthusiasts on the dark web claimed vinegar could substitute for acetic anhydride in rudimentary meth labs? Don't try that at home, your kitchen will smell like salad. Jesse Pinkman enters the scene, a slouched figure draped in baggy hoodies, spit-talking his version of teenage ennui. You hear the word bitch tossed around so casually it almost becomes comedic punctuation. There's your first sleep-inducing joke. His world is a clutter of empty pizza boxes and recycled soda cans, an ecosystem where ambition goes to die. Yet he knows chemistry, perhaps from too many high school labs cleaned up by overworked janitors who never suspected he'd use pipettes for illicit endeavors. You watch Walt's moment of reckoning, the frail teacher-turned-patient staring at a jagged line on a CT scan that looks like a road map to oblivion. A fringe pathologist once posited you could trace personality shifts to single nucleotide polymorphisms. Historians still argue whether genetics or circumstance matter more, and you sense Walt teetering on both. The sterile room's hum morphs into your own heartbeat as he contemplates the ransom note of a bank statement, his family's future written in numbers he may never spend. Here's joke number 2. If only healthcare could be purchased with monopoly money. In a stroke of desperate genius, he calls Jesse Pinkman, the last person you'd trust with a Bunsen burner. Their conversation crackles like static, the desert heat vibrating through your headphones. He proposes a plan so reckless that even you wince. Cook methamphetamine in an RV on BLM land, hidden in plain sight. Anthropologists note that itinerant labs in the Southwest echo the clandestine camps of Prohibition-era bootleggers. Historians still argue whether geography or technology drove those early moonshiners. As Walt speaks, you smell burning rubber and fate colliding. Your third joke, don't inhale too deeply, that scent is just Peterbilt tires and regret. The RV's engine coughs to life, its body vibrating like an anxious heart. Jesse hands Walt a battered chemistry kit, and your senses tingle at the sight of colored liquids swirling in glass flasks. You're halfway between fascination and fear, counting pills in the back of your mind as the desert sun begins its descent. In this moment, you're not a viewer, you're an accomplice, toes dangling over an abyss of moral compromise. You trudge alongside them into a future where every decision feels as volatile as the reagents in their pots. The RV lurks like a metallic tomb, a promise of wealth and ruin in equal measure. Tonight, you're not just easing in for sleep, you're hitching a ride on a runaway train. Remember that chalk-dusted lab coat, and brace yourself, this journey has only just begun. Section 2. Desert Aftermath. You stumble out of the RV's sweltering interior, the desert sun slamming into your skin like a hot poker. Walt's voice cracks as he motions to Jesse. The cook went sideways, and now there's a body dissolved in acid somewhere back there. In 1881, this very region hosted over 50 mining boomtowns that sprang up overnight and died just as fast, leaving skeletal wood buildings to rot under the same relentless sun you're under now. Historians still argue whether those ghost towns fell due to resource depletion or railroad politics, and right now you can feel that same abandonment seeping into your bones. Your heart thuds as you recall that chalk-dusted lab coat from last night, now spattered with chemical burns and regret. You probably won't survive this without at least one more existential crisis, but press on, you're already in too deep. Walt fumbles with a map of abandoned settlements, his fingers shaking like Bunsen burners on low flame. He points to one called Polvadera, its wooden storefronts decayed into splinters, promising a discreet disposal site. You inhale a lungful of arid air, tasting salt and fear, as Jesse mumbles about missing money. $2,000 gone, vanished like water in this wasteland. Jesse's hoodie flaps in the wind while he scours the roof of the RV for the empty money bag. "Bitch," he snaps at himself, his voice echoing off the cracked adobe walls of a long-forgotten saloon, and for a moment you almost laugh. There's your first joke, the absurdity of swearing at absent cash in a ghost town. He kicks up dust that swirls into little tornadoes around your ankles. A fringe theory once suggested these dust devils are portals to alternate realities. Don't count on your missing money slipping through one of those, though. Walt's teaching instincts stick out even now. He organizes the bodiless remains of the cook, Emilio's corpse dissolved in a vat of acid, into plastic buckets. You can practically smell the acrid chemical stench, a sensory detail that digs under your skin. You notice Jesse shivering despite the heat, guilt leaking through him like solvent through a cracked beaker. "We're basically modern-day alchemists," Walt whispers, half joking. "Except we turn chemicals into trouble instead of gold." That's your second joke, a shaky attempt at levity as you help him heft the buckets toward a dry creek bed. Historical tangent. Early 20th century moonshiners in the Appalachians used similar acid baths, minus the forensic cleanup. Historians still argue whether Prohibition-era bootleggers influenced modern clandestine labs, and you can see the parallel crackling in the air. The creek bed offers nothing but brittle driftwood and rattlesnake skins, so Walt drills holes in the soil and tips the buckets in. The liquid fizzes, sending up steam that smells faintly of burnt hair. You catch yourself recoiling, imagining dying hairs curling at the scalp. Meanwhile, Jesse's on his knees by an overturned wheelbarrow, rifling through a stash of tattered bills, what's left of your lifeline. "I swear, man," he groans. "This money had legs." You roll your eyes. There's your third joke. If cash could walk, it'd sprint away from you. He finds a few bills stuck to the RV's undercarriage and flings them into Walt's bag. Together, you press your trembling fingers into the paper, a reminder that your fortune can still slip away like sand through a sieve. Suddenly, a wind gust lifts a wooden plank from the saloon's collapsed roof, sending it clattering past you. You flinch, adrenaline pumping. Jesse scrambles to upright the RV, and you half expect an old prospector's ghost to holler curses from the shadows. A fringe local legend claims spirits of poisoned miners roam these ruins at dusk. Historians still argue whether those stories were early tourism scams or genuine survivor accounts. Either way, you're not sticking around to find out. Heat haze warps the horizon as you pile back into the RV. Walt's eyes are sunken, every line in his face carved deeper by worry. He remarks on the irony, 10,000 miles of road trip, and you end up cleaning up desert graveyards. You let out a soft laugh that comes out more like a wheeze, maybe from the acid fumes, or maybe from the absurdity of it all. The RV lurches forward, tires crunching over gypsum and broken glass, carrying you back toward Albuquerque and a future that feels more haunted than ever. As the sun dips below the jagged mesa, you trace the RV's taillight glow against the twilight. Remember that desert wind portal? Neither do you, just a callback for your weary mind. But you know this, every mile you put between you and that ghost town is a mile closer to madness. The acid buckets remain at your back, silent tombstones marking the start of your descent into darkness. And Walt, ever the reluctant captain, grips the wheel like a man trying to hold onto his last scraps of dignity. You slide down in your seat as the RV settles into a pre-dawn hum, the engine's rhythm a lullaby for your frayed nerves. Outside, the desert exhales its nighttime chill, stirring memories of those ghost towns that once thrived and died under similar skies. You tuck all that away, every chemical hiss, every missing bill, every historical echo, into a silent promise. You will survive tonight, and tomorrow you'll cook again. Section 3, Racing Deadline. You lean forward as the RV's heater clicks off, the cabin cooling in tandem with your mounting dread. Walt glances at his phone, every vibration feels like a tumor gnawing at his lungs. In 2007, the average patient with stage 3 lung cancer had only about a year before metastasis struck, a grim statistic that presses against your ribs like a vice. Historians still argue whether the advent of targeted therapies in the 2000s actually extended survival or merely shifted hope onto biotech marketing, and you can't help but wonder as Walt's breath comes in shallow rasps. Your fingers graze over the pile of evidence bags he's stuffed on the dash, lab notes, empty pill bottles, a crisp chemotherapy schedule. He zips each plastic shell with the precision of a coroner sealing a body bag. You probably won't survive this without your own plastic bag of aspirin, but resist the urge. You need to stay sharp. Outside, the bleary desert light seeps through grimy windows, painting the RV's interior in sepia tones that feel both vintage and ominous. Jesse crouches by a stack of sodden cash, his hoodie soaked in solvent and fear. He picks up a bill, sniffing it like spoiled milk. "It's contaminated," he mutters, watching ink smear under his thumb. A fringe practice among early bootleggers was to stamp counterfeit bills with phenylacetone to mark territory. Don't bank on your 20s being any cleaner. You stifle a laugh, there's your first joke, because nothing says success like handling chemically compromised currency. Walt's eyes flick to the clock again. He moves with teacherly efficiency, bagging loose papers into an evidence pile. Student quizzes scrawled with periodic tables, a framed photo of his family, Walt Jr.'s transistor radio. You almost reach out to steady him, but remember that itch you felt under the desk last section. Rumor has it rattlesnakes sometimes hibernate in abandoned RVs. Historians still argue whether a venomous snake bite would kill faster than untreated cancer, so maybe keep both scenarios in mind. As Walt peppers the bags with zip ties, you feel the weight of every sealed item, like sealing away chunks of his old life. The click-click of the ties echoes through the RV, each noise a tiny verdict. Jesse's hands shake so badly he drops a handful of bills. They flutter like bedraggled butterflies onto the stained floor mats. A cloud of dust rises, reminding you of tumbleweeds spinning across Route 66 in the 1930s, a period when roadside diners dotted this highway, catering to weary travelers. You breathe in that ghost motel nostalgia, even as Walt's head bows in silent grief. Jesse snatches a wallet and peels out a crisp 100. "We can launder at the car wash, right?" he asks, eyes wide. You cringe. Laundering money at a car wash sounds like using a toaster to dry your hair. That's your second joke, a fleeting grin in the tunnel of tension. He rinses the bills under a trickle of lukewarm water from a clunker faucet. The bills curl at the edges, ink bleeding like a bruise. A fringe chemist's forum once claimed soaking currency in isopropyl could remove residue, but historians still argue if any residue actually dissolves or just redistributes. The RV rattles as Walt pulls out a small black case, evidence from his teaching colleagues who still suspect something's off. You hear his voice tighten. "I need to hold on to these until I figure out what comes next." The hiatus between words stretches long enough for you to taste betrayal, like biting into a caramel apple only to find the core rotten. Walt stows the case beneath the passenger seat, and your knee brushes cold metal. A shiver snakes down your spine. Time presses in. Every tick from the dashboard clock is punctuated by the drone of the engine and Jesse's ragged breathing. You've been here for hours, long enough that your jeans feel glued to the seat, long enough to contemplate if oxygen tanks should be standard RV equipment. A mainstream fact: in the early 20th century, long-haul trucks didn't have pressurized cabins, exposing drivers to dust pneumonia. Modern RVs fared better, but internal air quality can still kill. Historians still argue whether vehicle-bound illnesses were underreported, and you're not about to test that theory. You reach for a bottle of water, twisting the cap to break the seal. The plastic pops, sharp relief in the swamp of dread. You swig deeply, letting the cold liquid sluice down your throat. Jesse steals a glance and mimics you, hands trembling so violently that droplets fly in every direction. Drops bead your forehead, the only moisture in these arid miles. Walt kneels by the RV door, placing his hand on the metal frame. He inhales through his nose, as if the desert breeze might grant him another precious breath. A stray piece of evidence catches the sunlight, a torn corner of Jesse's childhood science fair ribbon, the one he once won for a baking soda volcano. You remember Jesse tossing that ribbon into the fire after he flunked chemistry comp. It's a callback that makes you ache. This is the fight he never wanted. Suddenly, the RV lurches to the side as Jesse hits the brake too hard. Bills fly, evidence bags topple, and your heart vaults into your throat. Walt grips the wheel, pulling you back from the brink. You probably won't survive this without a defibrillator, but you settle for gripping the armrest. You watch the scattered papers dance across the dashboard like confetti at a funeral. Jesse scrambles to gather both cash and evidence. He murmurs, "I can't believe I let it get this contaminated." You place a steady hand on his shoulder. He jerks away, eyes wild. He was never great with delicate operations. Maybe because in high school he once soldered a radio to power only on full moon nights, convinced it tuned into werewolf broadcasts. Historians still argue whether his eclipse theory had any merit, but tonight you'd settle for it, picking up a cleaner frequency. The RV hums back to life. Walt presses his head against the wheel for a moment, then straightens. "We move now," he says, voice low. You sense both resolve and resignation melding in his posture. The dash clock ticks one more second, an audible gulp in the hush. As you pull away, the desert flares behind you, painting the horizon in molten orange. You watch the landscape slip by, a stranded pipeline, a lone saguaro casting long shadows, and a tumbleweed that, fringe lore claims, carries the souls of restless drifters. Historians still argue whether that's myth or metaphor, and tonight you don't care which. Jesse leans through the passenger window, flicking bills into a plastic bag. $32 clean, he announces, voice bitter. You bite your tongue, resisting the urge for joke number 3. If that's your profit margin, you'd have better luck busking in Santa Fe. Walt exhales, and you almost hear the whoosh of deflating hope. He tucks the money bag beneath his seat, next to his research notes, and glances at you. In that glance is a question. Are you in this for survival, or for the ride? You meet his gaze, offering a quiet nod. The RV's headlights carve through the gathering dusk as you head back to town. Every mile reclaims a piece of your dignity you traded in the ghost towns and makeshift acid pits. But as you settle in your seat, the throb in your chest reminds you, time is both enemy and ally, and right now, it's winning. Section 4. Gray Matter Rupture. You step out of the RV into the sterile glow of the Gray Matter Technologies lobby, the air-conditioned chill a stark contrast to the desert's blistering heat you've just left behind. Walt's former colleagues, Elliot and Gretchen Schwartz, glide through the atrium in tailored suits that shimmer like financial prospects you once had. In 1999, Gray Matter's initial public offering valued the company at over $7 billion, a staggering mainstream fact that now hangs between you and Walt like a neon sign flashing opportunity too late. Historians still argue whether Walt's early contributions to their research were undervalued or if he simply walked away too soon, and as you watch those polished floors reflect your own ragged shoes, you feel the weight of both interpretations. You probably won't survive this without a stiff upper lip, but steel yourself. This is more than a business meeting. Walt's lab coat is long gone, the high school smudges replaced by a worn leather jacket that whispers of second-hand dignity. The receptionist offers you a polite nod, as if she can't quite place the twitch in Walt's jaw, or the frayed edge of Jesse's hoodie poking out from behind you. Fringe rumors circulate among physicists that Gray Matter's zero-gravity research wing once experimented with sound frequencies to predict stock fluctuations. Don't bet your retirement on that hypothesis, though. Elliot's smile is as bright as the fluorescent panels overhead. Walter. It's been ages. You hear the past slipping into present tense, and you remember the chalkboard doodles you left on campus. Chemical pathways for synthesizing novel compounds that never saw the light of day. You half joke to yourself, if only you could brew some regret-removing elixir right now. That's your first joke, a brittle laugh in a room full of investor plaques. Gretchen's gaze shifts to Walt, sympathy and superiority warring across her features. "We heard about your diagnosis," she says, her tone dripping gentle condolence. You feel it in your throat, a cocktail of guilt and grief. You inhale, tasting the antiseptic air, a sensory detail that makes the white walls buzz like a lecture hall gone silent. Jesse shifts his weight, hoodie sleeves brushing the marble, as if afraid to offend these titans who crafted the wealth you now covet. Walt clears his throat. "I was wondering if you might consider helping me financially. Medical bills are..." His voice cracks like a broken Bunsen burner tube. He trails off, and you sense the exact moment his pride unspools before these two people who once trusted his chemistry brain. Fringe therapists claim crying in high-stress negotiations releases oxytocin and can actually secure better terms. Historians still argue whether emotional displays in business are true leverage or mere theatrics. Elliot exchanges a glance with Gretchen. They step aside, conferring in low tones while you count seconds like you're defusing a bomb. A big screen displays Gray Matter's latest drone technology, rotating in 3D, a mocking demonstration that Walt might have funded those innovations if he'd stuck around. You feel a jab of irony. This drone could spot an RV lab from a mile off, yet here you stand begging for help. Gretchen returns, hands folded. "Walt, we'd love to help, but our insurance covers just about everything. There's nothing we can do beyond that." Her statement lands like a metal door slamming shut. "You probably won't survive this without a nap." Sarcasm so gentle it's almost a lullaby. That's your second joke, a fleeting grin before the hospice of reality sets in. Walt's face hardens. He recalls the day he and Gretchen presented at a San Diego conference, unveiling their breakthrough in quantum dot display technology. In 2005, that paper earned them a standing ovation. Mainstream fact. They'd toasted victory with champagne that fizzed like Walt's ambitions. Now the bubbles feel lost to time. Historians still argue whether Walt's decision to sell his shares for a mere $5,000 was brilliant risk aversion or a catastrophic error. You sense Walt's anger coil like a spring ready to snap. "I didn't come here for pity," he says quietly. "I came because I still have value, because I can still contribute." Jesse shifts, uncomfortable with the corporate power play. You lean in, catching the flutter of press releases on a nearby table that boast Gray Matter's recent $200 million investment from international venture capitalists, another bitter reminder. Fringe bloggers say some of that cash originated from shell companies linked to pharmaceutical patents. Historians still argue whether that's corporate charity or clever tax dodge. Elliot's jaw tightens. He offers Walt a small envelope. It's some seed money. Consider it a gesture. The envelope is thick, but nowhere near a life raft. You slip a finger beneath its flap, feeling the chill of crisp bills, enough to cover a chemo cycle, but not the cost of this burgeoning empire you're about to build. You want to joke that $10,000 could buy you a small desert island, but instead you swallow the quip. Walt nods once, a controlled gesture. You note the catch in his breath, proof this isn't just about money, but wounded pride. He stores the envelope in his jacket pocket and extends a hand. Thank you. The handshake is polite, but loaded. You recall the time Walt tinkered with a homemade catalyst in his garage. He believed he could triple gray matter's efficiency overnight. Fringe engineers still argue whether that catalyst ever existed or was simply a lab myth. As you turn to leave, Jesse scoops up Walt's research notes from the lobby floor. One sheet flutters to the ground, a scribbled formula for reducing impurities in methamphetamine. You catch it, flipping it in your fingers like a forbidden scripture. A saguaro cactus-themed mosaic on the floor catches your eye, sensory detail that colors the moment with southwestern charm. Outside, the desert heat hits you again, an exhalation of humidity and sunburns. You watch the gray matter building recede, its glass facade reflecting a promise unfulfilled. Walt's jaw clenches, ambition rekindled. You probably won't survive this without sunscreen, but there's no time, every second counts. You slip the formula into your pocket, a talisman for the risks ahead. As the RV door closes behind you, the lobby's airlock seals shut both literally and metaphorically. You brace yourself for the next phase, lab initiation and chemical trials that await in the lonely desert. Remember the chalkboard, the acid buckets, and now this, a scrawled formula promising purity and power. The road stretches before you, paved with mistakes and molecules. Tonight, you're back in the game. Section 5, Lab Initiation. You step out of the RV into the desert's yawning expanse, where bleached sagebrush rattles in a breeze that carries more grit than relief. Jesse sets up the makeshift lab on a folding table, 2 hot plates perched on cinder blocks, glassware arranged like ritual vessels. In 1925, chemists in burgeoning industrial hubs first scaled methamphetamine production for legitimate nasal decongestants, a mainstream fact that flickers in your mind as you handle a flask filled with cobalt blue crystals. Historians still argue whether those early pharmaceutical runs unwittingly seeded today's illicit labs, and you feel the weight of that legacy in every grain you measure. The air tastes of burning butane from the torches Jesse ignites under each pot. You probably won't survive this without a face mask, but you resist. This is full immersion. The RV's interior hums behind you, a distant reminder of containment, while ahead, the sun scorches the horizon. Jesse pours liquid into a graduated cylinder, his hand shaking like a tuning fork on a trestle. You flash back to the chalkboard doodle of a hypothetical catalyst from Section 4. This is where theory meets fire. Jesse warns, one wrong drop, and we're toast. You stifle a laugh, your first joke, because toast is exactly how you'd end up smelling if propranolol ever met phenylacetone under these conditions. A fringe rumor among clandestine chemists insists that adding a dash of crushed aspirin can neutralize trace acids. Don't test that one unless you like your meth tasting like migraine relief. He swirls the flask gently, watching the crystals dissolve. The solution turns hue until it glows electric in the desert glare. You lean in, catching the chemical tang on your tongue like licking a battery. A fringe lab diary once claimed a chemist inadvertently created a vivid green variant by swapping water for pond runoff. Historians still argue whether it was myth or malicious prank. At least you won't end up with swamp meth. On the table, a battered digital scale clicks at 0.92 grams, just short of the 1 gram target. Walt kneels beside Jesse, voice low and precise. Adjust the solvent ratio. We need 99.1% purity, or Tuco will sniff out impurities faster than a border patrol dog. In the 1940s, purity measurements this exact became the gold standard for penicillin yields, another mainstream fact. You feel your pulse accelerate as each syllable lands like a commandment. You grab a pipette and add a few milliliters of toluene, the solvent sloshing with a whisper. The desk rattles. You almost drop the pipette. Careful, Walt cautions, pressing a gloved hand to steady your wrist. There's a brief, charged moment, too intimate for a chemistry set, yet you feel it crackle like static before a storm. You recall the acid fumes sting from Section 2, and shiver, though the sun beats down mercilessly. The first crystals begin to precipitate, forming jagged shards that catch the light. You pinch one between gloved fingers and tap it against a watch glass, a high-pitched ring, like glass struck by rain. You grin, your second joke, because if meth could play music, it'd be a metal cymbal crash. Jesse flicks a shard into a small vial, then sets it on the scale. It reads 1.03 grams. He pumps his fist, but the victory fizzles when Walt mutters, impurity by 0.2%, too high. The sun's descent accelerates shadows across the table. You strip off a glove and rub your sweaty palms together, tasting the faint metallic residue. A fringe debate among psychopharmacologists suggests that purity above 99% alters the subjective high more than quantity, and you ponder whether quality could topple quantity in their world, or yours. Historians still argue whether the earliest labs cared about high or hype, but you care now. Jesse rebalances the ratio, adding a smaller measure of hydrochloric acid. The air sizzles as he pours, and you jump at the hiss. That's your third joke. Nothing says romance like hissing acid in your face. The mixture bubbles into a deeper blue, almost indigo. You catch yourself marveling at the hue, an absurd, human moment amid lawless chemistry. Meanwhile, Walt checks the thermometer. Its mercury column quivers at 170 degrees Celsius. In classical chemical lore, surpassing 180 degrees Celsius risks byproducts that can turn your product brown, a mainstream fact that saved countless rogue cooks from accidental tan-tinted batches. You wipe sweat from your brow and hear the flask sigh, like a reluctant confession. A gust of wind kicks up dust, scattering orange grit across the table. Some grains land in the solvent. Jesse curses. You flick them away, mindful not to spill anything. Desert sand in your meth is like sand in your sleep. It ruins the experience. A fringe hypothesis once claimed that submicron desert dust could catalyze unwanted crystallization. Historians still argue if that theory holds water. Tonight, you refuse to become a test subject. As the last crystals settle, Jesse decants the mixture into a vacuum flask. You link the pump hose, and the apparatus hums low, drawing air out like a thirsty draft. You breathe deep, tasting the vacuum's cold promise. Walt times the process on his phone, finger tapping in Morse-like rhythm. The countdown drips through your veins as the crystals clump pristine and blue. You scoop them into a porcelain bowl, sensory detail shining through the cold white curve, and run your gloved finger over the smooth edge. It's like tracing the rim of a perfect wine glass, but you taste neither grapes nor celebration. Instead, there's the faint bite of residual acid that leaves your tongue numb. You wrinkle your nose. Walt lifts a crystal to the light. 99.4%, he announces, voice soft. You exhale, a relief so deep it almost lulls you. This is more than a cook, it's redemption for every mistake welded into this desert crucible. But you know redemption here is fleeting. Jesse stashes the vial in a padded case. We did it, he breathes, eyes glassy. You pat his back. No words, you've said enough. The RV clicks as its engine idles, an olfactory lullaby of diesel and solitude. You feel your eyelids droop, but you resist. the desert still hums with open possibilities and hidden threats. You look down at the crystalline prize, cobalt shards that glint with promise and peril. Remember the acid buckets from Section 2? This is the other side of that coin. One dissolves bodies, the other refines intentions. You pocket a single shard, an unspoken vow. Tonight, you cook not just to survive, but to prevail. As the sun slips beneath the horizon, the desert exhales long shadows. The RV's headlights flick on, slicing through dusk like watchful eyes. You wipe the last vestiges of sweat from your brow and step back inside, carrying the blue legacy you've wrought. There's no lullaby here, only the promise of what comes next. Section 6. Blue Meth Emergence. You wake to the RV's interior glowing like a lantern in the pre-dawn gloom, the indigo shards of crystal meth you perfected last night glinting on the dash like fragments of a shattered sapphire. In 1919, the U.S. government classified methamphetamine as a restricted substance after military pilots reported heightened alertness and severe crashes, a mainstream fact that reminds you how quickly a tiny molecule can flip from miracle to menace. Historians still argue whether wartime prescriptions seeded post-war addiction, and you feel that tension in your bones as you cradle a vial under the soft hum of the RV's overhead light. Jesse slouches in the passenger seat, eyelids heavy as desert fog. He eyeballs the flask and whispers, "Damn, this looks like pool cleaner heaven." You chuckle, your first joke, because nothing says danger like comparing crystal meth to your backyard spa. The amber lamp casts long shadows across the flasks, exaggerating every edge like a slasher movie freeze frame. You probably won't survive this without blinking twice, but the brilliance of that cobalt blue hypnotizes you into stillness. Walt emerges from the back with a stainless steel scoop, the metal cool against his fingertips. He taps out a single grain onto the scale, 0.01 grams. In 1955, pharmacologists first measured dosage down to milligrams for hallucinogens, a fringe milestone that led to both breakthroughs and black market myths about microdosing your way to enlightenment. Historians still argue whether tiny doses tested perception or just fueled mythic hippie lore, and tonight you wonder if your own minute spark could rewrite your destiny. You lean over, catching the crystalline edge between glove and glass. The shard catches the light like a star that fell into your hand. A fringe rumor claims some cooks intentionally add trace amounts of rare earth metals to adjust refractive index. Don't go chasing your high on atomic physics, though. You stifle your second joke. If you wanted a rare earth buzz, you'd join a university lab and survive on instant noodles instead. Walt scoops up a batch and dumps it into a Pyrex dish. The crystals slide and click, a lullaby-like percussion that lulls your tension into a trance. You almost close your eyes, and you swear you can taste the desert breeze, aroma of pinyon pine and impending calamity. Jesse yawns, revealing gaps in his teeth like eroded canyon walls, a sensory detail that grounds you in human fragility. The RV rocks as you shift your weight, the engine idling with refrain. You jiggle the dish to spread the crystals, creating a mosaic of cobalt shards that glitter like a constellation. A mainstream fact flickers in your mind. NASA once experimented with liquid-core solar sails in low Earth orbit, and that same technological daring thrums through your fingertips now. One misstep, and your lab goes supernova. Historians still argue whether those solar sail tests advanced space travel or were just PR stunts, but you know there's a parallel here. Big ambitions built on fragile constructs. Jesse's phone buzzes with a text, "Tuco's comin'." You gasp. Your third joke is a breathless snort, because "Tuco's coming" sounds like a bad teen horror sequel. You wipe away the stray mote of dust lingering on your glove, remembering the desert sand fiasco from Section 5. This time, every grain matters. Jesse shrugs on his jacket, hoodie rattling like tumbleweed. Walt picks up a small canvas bag, inside the perfect blue shards. He seals it and tucks it into a locker beneath the steering wheel. You glimpse the wire spool of plastic ties peeking out, a callback that tightens the moment. Evidence bags once held cancer notes, acid buckets once held bodies, and now this bag holds your ticket to survival, or destruction. The RV door thuds shut, sealing you in a capsule of diesel and destiny. You sink into the driver's seat as Jesse jumps behind the wheel, floorboard groaning. The headlights flood the desert floor, illuminating sagebrush that glints like metallic confetti. You probably won't survive this without checking your mirrors, but the thrill hums through your veins regardless. On the radio, a scratchy country song crackles. "If you wanna go fast, you gotta go alone," the announcer croons. You smirk, your second joke, because meth cooks know the real risk. Nobody cooks alone and lives to tell the tale. The tune warbles under the RV's rumble, a sensory misfit that blends motel lobby nostalgia with outlaw rhythms. Tuco Salamanca's strip mall lair emerges ahead, neon signs buzzing like electric lizards. In 1982, neon tubing reached peak popularity in roadside signage, a mainstream fact that makes these flickering letters feel both retro and menacing. Historians still argue whether neon's decline in the 21st century sprang from LED efficiency or changing aesthetics, and tonight you aren't bothered by the trend, you're here to trade in danger's currency. Jesse kills the engine, and the RV rolls to a silence heavy enough to taste. You step out, boots crunching gravel. The wind carries echoes of drag races and growling V8s. Fringe lore suggests early street racers used nitrous from soda dispensers. Don't try pocketing whipped cream chargers for that kind of boost, though. You get one frantic glance behind you. Desert horizon surrendering to city lights. Through the curtained window, you spot Tuco's silhouette, a mountain of coiled menace rocking in a steel chair. He palms a chipped crystal glass tumbler, amber fluid swirling like a keening spirit. You swallow. The neon glows off his face, tracing a grin as jagged as your moral compass. Jesse hands him the bag. You watch Tuco tip the crystals into his palm like spilled jewels. He sniffs, crunches one between his teeth, and the hush snaps. He roars laughter, voice cavernous. "Heisenberg," he bellows, the name ricocheting off the concrete block walls. You feel every vibration in your chest like an earthquake. He gestures you inside. The shop reeks of stale sweat and broken promises, a sensory detail that sticks in your nostrils. You follow, the canvas bag a lead weight in your pocket. A fringe historian once posited that modern criminal syndicates mirror feudal fiefdoms in structure. Historians still argue whether that analogy holds, but you're about to meet Tuco's barons and serfs. Inside, you hover by a metal table strewn with craps chips and Cheeto dust. Tuco snaps his fingers. Taste. He thrusts a shard at you. You probably won't survive this without saying no, but your curiosity wins. You cup it in your palm, cool, precise, undeniable. You drop it into your mouth, teeth crack, and warmth blooms in your chest, complacency creeping in like a desert mirage. For a heartbeat, you're weightless, the room's tensions dissolving. Then Tuco shouts, "More, I want more." His demand slams down like a gauntlet. Jesse steps back, trembling. You wipe your tongue on your sleeve, flawless delivery, but you refuse to smile. This is a dangerous compliment. Tuco leans forward, eyes lit by neon fire. "You give this to me, and your family," he growls. "But you cross me," he snaps again, and you imagine limbs flying. A mainstream fact flies through your mind. In medieval Japan, Yakuza oaths mirrored blood pacts to cement alliances. Historians still argue whether formal ceremonies matter more than brutality, and here, alliance and brutality share a razor-thin line. You exchange a look with Walt, whose face is carved like desert sandstone by determination. He steps up, voice low, "We deliver purity, loyalty, and discretion." Tuco grins wolfishly. "You got one last test, loyalty test." He yanks a bouquet of nails and a hammer from a shelf. You recognize that hammer from every crime flick ever made. As you kneel, nails poised on your palm, you remember the saguaro mosaic from Section 4 and the acid pits from Section 2, each memory a talisman warding off panic. You brace yourself, heart pounding like drumbeats in a trance. The hammer drops. You flinch, pain radiates through your flesh, but it's only a test. Tuco snatches the nail and starts on his own hand. You watch rivulets of blood trace lines on his knuckles. It's a fringe ritual of respect. Historians still argue whether such tattoos signify loyalty or cruelty. Breathing ragged, Tuco studies you. You align your gaze with his. No fear, only calm. He nods once, a signal passing between predator and prey. Jesse exhales, Walt's shoulders sag, and you realize you survived the test intact. Tuco wipes blood on his pants. Family now, he declares, voice soft as death. The neon hum intensifies, your new kinship etched in electric light. You pocket the canvas bag, each crystal a promise and a warning. Outside, the night air tastes of burnt ozone and newfound allegiance. You slide back into the RV, Jesse at the wheel, Tuco's laughter chasing you down the strip. The cobalt vial rests on the dash, pulsing with potential. Before the engine purrs you away, you glance back at the strip mall, neon sharks circling under moonlight. You probably won't survive this unscarred, but you'll survive, and you'll cook again. Section 7, Tuco's Introduction. You settle back into the RV, its metal walls groaning in the aftermath of Tuco's loyalty test, and feel every rivet tremble beneath your spine. The desert night presses against the tiny lab like a watchful sentinel. In 1944, clandestine penicillin labs sprang up in remote fields to outmaneuver wartime shortages, a mainstream fact that grips your mind as you unpack glassware and chemicals under the muted glow of the RV's dome light. Historians still argue whether those improvised labs saved more lives than official programs, and you sense tonight's comparably perilous brew could determine more than just profit. Jesse leans across the table, fingers tracing the etchings on a battered hot plate. You probably won't survive this without a fire extinguisher, but you stow away caution in favor of urgency. The last cook went smooth only in appearance. The echo of Tuco's roar still reverberates in your ears. Now, every measurement, every drop, must be flawless. No Uncle Walter lectures left unsaid. You load a decommissioned Coleman stove with butane canisters, careful to check for leaks. A fringe anecdote suggests bootleggers once carried ammunition to puncture faulty tanks in emergencies. Don't try that here unless you fancy being part of an accidental ballistics report. You stifle a laugh, your first joke, because nothing diffuses tension like picturing a meth lab turning into a fireworks display. The scale ticks at 1.000 grams of pseudoephedrine, its digital readout flickering in the RV's low light. You recall Walt's cold precision. He once taught titration to precision of 0.001 molar concentration. A stray grain off, and the reaction could veer between crystalline perfection and toxic sludge. You slip on gloves, feeling the crinkle of nitrile between your fingers like a surgeon preparing for clandestine surgery. Jesse fastens a makeshift fume hood by propping a broken windshield visor atop an overturned ice chest. The hood's filter is nothing more than a coffee filter stuffed into duct tape. In 1970s DIY circles, home chemists used pillowcases and charcoal. Historians still argue whether such rigs ever truly protected lungs. You hold your breath as he lights the torch beneath the first flask, the flame flickering like a cautionary whisper. You pour a clear solvent, heptane, into a flask, the liquid sloshing with a muffled hiss. A fringe suggestion on an underground forum claimed that adding a pinch of vitamin C speeds precipitation. Don't count on your health fortune improving here though. You resist the urge to crack your second joke. If vitamin C cures scurvy, maybe it cures your moral scurvy too. The flask hums under the torch's heat as you stir with a glass rod. The solution begins to thicken, transitioning from water clear to straw yellow. You lean in, catching the solvent's chemical bite on your tongue, like licking an overworked battery. There's a moment of beauty in that color shift, a triumphant signal that the reaction's on track. Yet you know that beauty carries ruin. One slip, and the exothermic surge could boil the flask dry in seconds. Walt's low voice cuts through the hum. Monitor temperature. We can't exceed 120 degrees Celsius. In early industrial labs, overheating yielded carcinogenic byproducts that turned batches a sickly brown. That fact anchors you, your fingertips steady as you position a dial thermometer into the neck of the flask. It quivers at 95 degrees Celsius, climbing slowly. Suddenly, a miscalculation. Jesse overfeeds the mixture with reagent, and the solution froths like a bloated cauldron. You shout, "Stop!" But your voice is swallowed by the RV's cramped echo chamber. The foam threatens to overflow. You grab a beaker to catch the spill, but your elbow knocks a spatula into the flask, sending shards of metal clattering inside. Your heart thunders. Metal ions can catalyze unwanted decomposition. You yank the Bunsen hose to reduce heat, but the torch sputters in protest, its flame dancing erratically. A fringe chemist's diary once reported a runaway exotherm turning a bathtub into a chemical bonfire. Historians still argue whether that was fluorinated byproduct or overblown rumor. You can't afford rumors. You grip the flask's neck and swirl gently, trying to reintegrate the collapsed foam. The solution's temperature spikes to 125 degrees Celsius. Sweat beads your forehead like desert rain. You jab at the dial to cut the butane flow, an ill-placed instinct that causes the flame to flare before dying. The flask's exterior glows incandescent for a heartbeat too long. Time stretches as you brace for disaster. Glass cracking, chemicals erupting, everything igniting in a flash. But the reaction calms, the temperature dipping back under control. You exhale, tasting copper on your tongue. That's your third joke. Your breath now tastes like late-stage hardware store. Walt peers over your shoulder, eyes narrowing. Adjust the cooling bath, he instructs, reaching for a cooler filled with ice water carried in from Tuco's lair. You plop the flask into the bath, the hiss of heat exchange echoing in the RV like a hail of raindrops. The yellow solution recedes into clarity, the foam subsiding. You slide a stopper into the flask's neck and attach the vacuum line. The pump whines and lab air rushes out, pulling impurities like a silent guardian. You glance at Jesse's face, etched with relief and lingering guilt over the spatula mishap. He gives you a nod so small you almost miss it. As the crystals begin to form, you swap in a second hot plate to dry the product, stacking flasks like precarious towers. A mainstream tidbit surfaces. In 19th century candlemaking, similar vacuum desiccators were used to cure tallow, a practice long abandoned when kerosene surged in popularity. Historians still argue whether oil candles ever glowed purer than wick-based ones. Tonight, your blue crystals outshine any flame. The RV rattles as it rolls briefly, a bump in the dirt road jostling your rig. One flask teeters, and you catch it with a clenched jaw. The cliff-edge balance of every piece of glassware feels like a metaphor for your life, one misstep away from shards. With crystal form achieved, you scrape the contents into a petri dish, each jagged shard clicking as they pile. Their cobalt glint under the RV's dome light, sensory detail, slices through tension like a blade. You inhale deep, solvent fumes and victory, an intoxicating mix. Jesse bags the crystals in labeled Ziplocs, Tuco, round 2. You organize them into a battered briefcase, its foam lining stained by past successes and failures. You snap it shut, the click resonating like the final door to your makeshift empire. Outside, dawn bleeds at the horizon. The RV's engine hums back to life, carrying you toward the next rendezvous. You remember the rustic penicillin fields and ghost lab rumors, the history, the fringe, the open debates, all swirling in the crucible of this cook. You slide into the driver's seat, the road a ribbon of possibilities and perils. The cobalt cargo sits between you and uncertainty, every gram a testament to your chemistry under pressure. As the RV rolls forward, you brace for the fallout. Profits, power struggles, and perhaps another close call that tests your very survival. Section 8. Chemistry Under Pressure. You slide into the RV's cramped lab area, where heat radiates from hot plates like a furnace stoking its final embers. The early sun blazes through dust-flecked windows, igniting motes that drift like embers in a campfire. In 1911, Marie Curie's pioneering work on radium purification demonstrated that precision under pressure could yield miraculous results, a mainstream fact that flashes through your mind as you adjust a crude pressure gauge on your makeshift reactor. Historians still argue whether Curie's techniques accelerated industrial applications at the cost of safety, and now, with every tortured hiss from your gear, you sense the same tension. You probably won't survive this without a reinforced shelter, but you're committed to the grind. The reactor's pressure needle quivers at 14 psi, just shy of the 15 psi threshold that risks vessel rupture. Jesse stands guard with a busted welding mask perched on his forehead, its cracked visor offering more intimidation than protection. You suppress a laugh, your first joke, because if that mask could talk, it'd beg for retirement. A fringe synthesis blog once claimed that adding a few grains of silica gel can fortify reaction chambers against microfractures. Don't bank your life on internet folklore though. You sift through a ziplock of desiccant packets, finding one unpunctured, and wedge it between the reactor's bolts. You tap the bolt heads with a wrench, metal ringing like a funeral bell, hoping it buys you an extra second of safety. Walt kneels beside Jesse, voice low but urgent, increase coolant flow. We can't let it exceed 80 degrees Celsius or we risk an irreversible exotherm. In industrial chemical plants of the 1960s, runaway reactions caused at least 30 documented plant fires. Historians still argue whether those incidents led to stricter regulations or simply better PR from Big Oil. You tighten the coolant valve, hearing the whoosh of antifreeze flood the jacket. The reactor's core hums, the solvent inside churning like a shaken cocktail. You grip the support frame, knuckles whitening as the metal vibrates beneath your gloves. The pressure gauge ticks upward, 14.5 psi. You swallow hard, every heartbeat a countdown. Jesse fumbles with the gas torch, its flames sputtering erratically. You catch a stray spark on a rag, and your skin prickles, sensory detail that sends a shudder through your spine. Watch it, you hiss, using your second joke to mask the adrenaline. This lab's starting to look like a pyrotechnics show. A sudden groan from the reactor makes you freeze. The seals whine as if crying for mercy. You lean in, catching a sharp hiss as vapor leaks from a corroded seam. Fringe chemists debate whether PTFE gaskets from old car brakes can substitute for silicone seals. Historians still argue if such hacks ever truly held up under pressure. You scan the RV for a spare gasket, but find only a cracked O-ring and a prayer. Walt's eyes narrow. "We patch it," he declares, grabbing a length of duct tape and wrapping it obsessively around the seam. You raise an eyebrow. Duct tape is great for warts, not high-pressure chemistry, but desperation trumps protocol. You probably won't survive this without a better seal, but you cross your fingers and hope. The reactor's hum deepens, the mixture unsteady. You glance at the coolant reservoir. It's half empty. Without more ice water, the temperature could spike uncontrollably. You curse under your breath. Finding ice in the desert is harder than finding a sane chemist on a message board. Jesse scrambles outside, returning with a cooler of melting ice water pilfered from a neighboring campsite. You grab the hose and clamp it to the reactor's inlet. The coolant gushes in, steam wafting off like morning mist. You exhale, tasting metal and relief mingled on your tongue. The pressure gauge falls to 13 psi. You mutter a quiet thanks to whoever first invented dynamic cooling systems, a mainstream fact you probably shouldn't admit to enjoying right now. Historians still argue whether dynamic cooling laid the foundation for modern petrochemistry, but tonight, it's your lifeline. In the cramped space, the solvent inside the reactor begins to clarify, crystals forming against the glass like frost on a windowpane. You lean forward, catching the crystalline scratch of growing shards, sensory detail so vivid it almost hypnotizes your fear away. Then, a thud from outside, you spin to see the RV shudder as a bored longhorn steer bumps the side. Dust drifts in from the ajar door, speckling the lab like pollen in a sunbeam. You gasp and lunge for the reactor's valve, turning it to bleed off pressure. The needle quivers, dips to 12 psi. Your heart pounds so loudly it echoes in your ears. "Close it," Walt orders. You do, and the hissing stops. Silence crashes over you like a wave. You wipe sweat from your brow, the salty tang stinging your eyes. That's your third joke. If only tears dissolved metal tape, this seam would have been fixed years ago. Jesse shuts the outer door with a clang that reverberates through the RV. He tosses you a grin that's half relief, half terror. You lean against the reactor, letting your gloves scrunch in your fingers. The crystals inside spin into uniform shapes, promising purity and profit. You bag a small sample and test it under a handheld spectrometer. 99.6% purity, marginally better than the last batch. You release the pressure fully, then unbolt the reactor's top. Steam billows out, carrying the scent of victory and burnt brake pads. Walt dips a vial into the brew, swirling it. "We're ready," he says, voice calm but unshakable. You nod, sliding the sample into a padded pouch. A fringe rumor claims sophistication in such kits attracts federal attention, but historians still debate if any device alone tips off agents. You stash the spectrometer alongside the pouch. Part trophy, part liability. The RV lights flicker as you power down the hot plates. You step outside, inhaling the sunrise air, pinyon pine mixed with diesel exhaust. Each breath is a victory. The desert has tested you under pressure, and you answered with precision. You climb back inside, Jesse at the wheel, and pocket the pouch of crystals. The reactor's jacket cools, steam dissipating like a dragon's sigh. You catch the glint of stray shards on the floor mat, sensory detail that grounds you in this makeshift sanctum of lawlessness. As the RV rumbles onto the dirt road, you glance back at the lab, a tableau of hot plates, patched reactors, and a lone duct tape seam that held your fate. You probably won't survive this unscathed, but you did survive. Ahead lies Tuco's lair once more, city lights flickering like distant promises. Behind you lingers the desert's mute witness to your high-stakes alchemy. You settle into the seat, pocketing the spectrometer like a gambler's lucky chip. The road stretches out, and you steel yourself. More pressure tests await, with stakes as volatile as the chemicals you wield. But for now, in this moment, you breathe. Section 9. Family Fault Lines. You slip back into domestic orbit as the RV pulls onto the asphalt ribbon leading to your real home, Walt's suburban house where the beige stucco stands sentinel against the arid skyline. You probably won't survive this without at least a wry smile, but brace yourself. Normalcy is now as volatile as your lab reagents. In 1954, post-war suburban developments ballooned by over 40%, fueling the American dream of white picket fences and clean lawns, a mainstream fact that now feels like a gilded cage as you step past the mailbox. Historians still argue whether Levittown-style suburbs provided community or enforced conformity, and tonight you sense both undercurrents as you cross the threshold. Inside, the living room's air is chilled by an oblivious thermostat. Skylar stands by the window, her back rigid. You taste the faint aroma of laundry detergent, sensory detail that clashes with the stink of your hidden life. Jesse's hoodie-peeking presence in the hallway registers like a wrong note in a lullaby. You recall Tuco's neon glare from Section 7 and feel your pulse hitch. This isn't a cook site, it's ground zero for marital fault lines. Skylar's eyes meet Walt's, suspicion flickering. She notes the flecks of blue residue on his collar, the proof you left crystalline footprints on domesticity. A fringe psychological study once suggested spouses unconsciously track each other's micro-movements for signs of deceit. Historians still argue whether behavioral profiling predates modern surveillance, but Skylar's vigilance feels alarmingly prescient. Walt clears his throat. "I had to drop something off," he says, voice strained like a failing hot plate. You fight the urge to joke, "There's your first missed punchline." Instead, you pivot into a silent challenge, help him deflect suspicion. Skylar narrows her gaze. "Like what?" she asks, the question slicing the room's hush. Jesse coughs in the background. "Your second joke, the schoolyard bully's rookie act." Walt's mind races, mixing alibi chemicals faster than any Bunsen burner could. You step forward, slipping into second-person host mode. You trudge through the door, telling her you spent the day grading lab reports. You deliver it matter-of-fact. "Students aced stoichiometry, by the way." Historians still argue whether teachers who double as neighborhood heralds cemented suburban trust, but in this moment your statement tethers Skylar's doubts with just enough plausibility. Skylar unfolds her arms, studying Walt's face. Your pulse thunders. This counts as high-stakes negotiation. You add a fringe detail. The school purchased new slide projectors, but they jam constantly. Skylar's nostrils flare. She remembers the old projector that screeched in Section 1. The callback softens her suspicion. Education woes trump clandestine RV labs. Meanwhile, Walt slides his jacket onto a coat rack. You glimpse the bulge of the canvas bag from Section 7, cobalt crystals folded into fabric. A mainstream economic fact pricks you. Hidden assets account for over 20% of global household wealth in some surveys, a reminder that fortunes can both save and destroy families. Historians still argue whether such stores protected or precluded trust, and you know here it's both. Skylar softens slightly. "I'm glad you're home," she murmurs, half consolation, half checkmate. You inhale the detergent scent again, calibrating your next move. A fringe relationship guru once claimed couples unconsciously mirror each other's breathing during conflict. You try to slow your inhale to match hers. It works. Her shoulders drop a fraction. Jesse saunters past, feet clogging the hallway carpet. He offers Skylar a curt nod. "Your third joke, Walter's teenage sidekick playing butler." Skylar's lips twitch, resisting an amused smile. She retreats to the kitchen, humming under her breath as she sets down a mug of chamomile tea. The scent rises, herbal and conciliatory, a sensory detail more potent than any BR territory. Walt flops onto the couch, pats a cushion beside him, and you oblige. Under the soft glow of a table lamp, you script his words. "Long day in the desert," he sighs, voice low. "Students need me." Skylar hands him the tea, her fingers brushing his, a gesture that says more than words. You probably won't survive this without acknowledging the irony. Nurturing life by day, manufacturing chemical threats by night. Skylar settles beside him. You drop in another fringe tidbit. They're debating a field trip to the old Polvadera site. Kids want to see ghost towns firsthand. She quirks an eyebrow, another callback to Section 2, then shrugs. "Just no dangerous trips," she warns. You win a small victory, redirection away from the RV's harsh lessons. Jesse slips away to an empty room, presumably to catch up on video calls you dread to imagine. You lean into Walt, text your students the assignment later, claim the projector glitch caused delays. Skylar overhears and nods. Her wariness fades, replaced by the practical concern of lesson planning. You settle into the couch's worn fabric, feeling the domestic hum buffer the RV's engine roar still pounding in your skull. A mainstream architectural fact drifts in: mid-century furniture often used vinyl upholstery to mask stains, a prescient choice for clandestine chemists. You grin at the unspoken resonance. Historians still argue whether style or function drove those callbacks. Here, form and function collide on your lap. Skylar leans against Walt's shoulder. You feel the thermostat click down as the room cools. The evening's tranquility settles in, but it's a fragile veneer. You remind yourself, a single fleck of lab residue or a mismatched alibi could shatter the peace you've engineered. You rise to leave, heart hammering. Jesse pokes his head out, eyes unreadable. You nod, a silent brief, then slip into the hallway. Skylar glances after you, then exhales. You probably won't survive this without a broader truce, but for now, the family fault lines remain unbroken. As you step back toward the RV, the study lamp's glow fades behind you, leaving the living room in gentle shadow. The door clicks shut, a soft punctuation on suburban normalcy. Outside, the desert night waits, a reminder that home is only as safe as your secrets remain buried. Section 10. Jesse's Spiral. You stumble into the RV's dim corridor, fatigue weighing on your shoulders like a lead apron. Jesse Pinkman's absence is palpable. His hoodie, once a banner of slacker swagger, now drapes over a chair like a discarded flag. You probably won't survive this without asking yourself where he's gone, but curiosity propels you forward. In 1955, the Beat Generation poets famously drifted from jazz clubs to alleyways in search of meaning, a mainstream fact that mirrors Jesse's own quest for purpose amid guilt. Historians still argue whether their wanderings sparked counterculture or merely romanticized aimlessness, and tonight you wonder if Jesse's spiral is any less poetic. You find him on the porch roof of the house, legs dangling over the edge, gazing at the waxing moon. The cool night air brushes your face, sensory detail that contrasts with the desert's scorching memory. Guilt has become his compass, his friend Combo's death, the blood on his hands from Section 2's acid bath, and the mounting weight of Walt's expectations. A fringe psychologist once posited that guilt can manifest as rooftop crawling. Don't look for that in your DSM, but his perch feels like a confession booth under the sky. Jesse, you say softly, climbing the rickety ladder. He doesn't answer, eyes fixed on the stars. You clear your throat, your first joke, because if guilt had a Yelp review, it would be spooky minimal lighting. The porch creaks under your boots. You inch forward until you're beside him. He cracks a smile without humor, staring at the glowing chimneys in town. "I'm done, man," he whispers. The words hang between you like a rusted gate. A mainstream fact: during the Prohibition era, guilt drove many moonshiners to turn informant, betraying friends for redemption or self-preservation. Historians still argue whether those betrayals were cowardice or pragmatism, and in Jesse's tremor-filled voice you hear both. You sit beside him, dangling your own legs. You survived Tuco's palm nail test, you remind him, call back to Section 7. He snorts, your second joke, a noise somewhere between a laugh and a sob. "Doesn't feel like survival," he says, voice tight. Below, crickets chirp in syncopated rhythms. You remember the RV's engine hum from Sections 2 and 8, but now it's replaced by nocturnal symphonies. A fringe entomologist once claimed insect choruses mirror human heartbeats. Historians still debate whether that's metaphor or fact, but the analogy fits. Your heart thuds in your chest as you watch Jesse's silhouette against the moonlight. He pulls out a crumpled photograph, his younger self at science fair glory, ribbon pinned proudly on his jacket. You recall that ribbon from Section 3, the baking soda volcano wind-turned torch of irony. Jesse's thumb swipes away a tear. You taste the night air, pine and regret, as he murmurs, "I lost it all." You place a hand on his shoulder. "You still have us," you say, "Walt, you, the unsteady but fierce alliance you forged." He shakes his head. "I killed Combo. I let Jane die." A mainstream addiction study notes that overdose deaths among meth users surged by 45% in the early 2000s, a grim fact swinging over you like a guillotine. Historians still argue whether policy failures or personal choices bear more blame, and you see both in Jesse's haunted gaze. He hops down from the roof, stumbling toward the RV. You follow, catching him before he trips over the ladder. "Where are you going?" you ask. His answer is a grunt as he climbs inside without looking back. Inside, he reaches over the console for the stash box. "I need something," he mutters, rifling through vials. You probably won't survive this without intervention, but hesitate. The vials contain a dozen unlabeled substances, each with its own ghost story. A fringe chemists forum once suggested microdosing LSD eases guilt and creativity. Don't take your lab notes as therapy manuals, though. You step in, grabbing his wrist. "Jesse, no," you say, voice firm. He jerks away, eyes glassy. "I'm not your project, okay? I'm not Heisenberg's sidekick." There's your third joke. Therapeutic jargon meets drug wars, but you know it stings. His jaw clenches. Walt's voice echoes from the RV's front, distant but charged. "Pinkman." Jesse snaps to attention, guilt morphing into defiance. He shoves past you, boots clacking on the linoleum. You move after him, heart pounding like a Bunsen burner on high. He strides to the back, yanks open the storage compartment, and tosses a handful of blue crystals onto the table. "I can cook on my own," he says, fingers trembling. "I don't need you or him." The crystals glint like broken promises. A mainstream chemical fact: methamphetamine's molecular half-life in brain tissue is about 12 hours, a detail that parallels fleeting trust. Historians still argue whether chemistry or community drives addiction, and right now Jesse is flirting with both extremes. You step between him and the crystals. "This isn't the answer," you insist. He laughs, something brittle and sharp. "Yeah. Then what is?" He sweeps the crystals off the table. They clatter to the floor like fallen stars. You both crouch to gather them. Each shard cuts into your gloves, sensory detail that draws blood. He winces. A breeze rattles the RV's window. You glance at the moonlit horizon, endless potential, endless ruin. You imagine Jesse chained to that porch roof, oscillating between hope and heartbreak. You ever tried talking to someone? You suggest. Professional, I mean. Fringe rehab counselors once advocated rooftop therapy to reframe guilt. Historians still debate their efficacy, but maybe a couch is better than concrete. Jesse stares at you, expression wavering. He picks up a shard, presses it to his tongue. Test taste, callback to section 7. Then he flicks it away, and it skips across the floorboards. "Not tonight," he says, voice dropping to a whisper. You nod, eyes stinging with unshed frustration. "Tomorrow, then." You help him stash the crystals back into the canvas bag. The zipper squeaks like a door hinge in an empty church. He collapses onto the edge of the bunk, head in hands. You settle on the opposite bunk, giving him space but staying close. The wooden slats creak beneath you, the only sound for long moments. "Remember why we started?" you ask softly. "It wasn't just survival, it was to control something, to matter." He lifts his head, eyes red-rimmed. "Maybe I don't care anymore." You swallow, tasting guilt for both of you. A mainstream sociological fact: purpose-driven labor reduces depressive symptoms by up to 30%, a comforting statistic that feels intangible in this metal shell. Historians still argue whether purpose precedes well-being or vice versa, but you cling to the thought. Jesse looks at you, then at the cradle of crystals. He exhales, voice brittle. I want out. Your chest constricts. We'll find another way, you promise, though the words taste hollow. Above you, the RV's ceiling vent rattles like a distant storm. The desert wind presses against the shell, reminding you of every trial. Acid buckets, loyalty tests, runaway reactors. You ball your fists in your lap. Jesse lies back, gaze fixed on the vent. Tell Walt I'm okay, he mumbles, voice drifting. You nod, fighting tears, yours or his, you can't tell. You rise, moving to the driver's seat. Get some rest, you say. Tomorrow, we talk. He nods without lifting his head. You lock eyes on the desert horizon through the windshield. The night hums, full of unseen faults and fragile alliances. You probably won't survive this without saving Jesse, and maybe yourself in the process. You turn off the RV's lights, leaving the interior in soft darkness. Silence settles, thick as a chemical blanket. Outside, the moon glows, distant and untouchable. You climb down and close the door. On the porch roof, Jesse's silhouette remains, a lone figure perched on the edge of redemption and ruin. You take a steadying breath, tasting pine and dust, and prepare for the next day's reckoning. Section 11. Moral Fractures. You slip into the dining room just as the overhead fixture bathes the table in soft, warm light. Skylar's handiwork, fluffy mashed potatoes and honey-glazed carrots, sits like a peace offering across square white plates. You probably won't survive this without a moment of normalcy, but your palms are still stained with cobalt blue. In 1955, the concept of the nuclear family dinner rose to prominence on television, broadcasting idealized meals into living rooms across America, a mainstream fact that now feels as staged as your own facade. Historians still argue whether TV dinners strengthen familial bonds or set unrealistic expectations, and tonight you feel both undercurrents with every polite forkful. As you ease into your seat, you recall the RV's patched reactor from Section 8, the hiss of coolant and the crackle of duct tape seams. The contrast between that claustrophobic crucible and this spacious room feels surreal, like two lives colliding in one body. Jesse stands in the kitchen doorway, sleeves rolled up, carrying a glass pitcher of iced tea. A fringe rumor claims that some 19th-century households believed teapots whispered gossip if left uncovered. A silly notion, but you half expect the glass to murmur secrets of your hidden empire. Skylar notices the tension in your shoulders and offers a thin smile. Long day? She asks, voice gentle but probing. You nod, brushing invisible specks from your sleeve. Just long, you reply, letting your tone hover between weariness and evasion. You remember Tuco's palm nail test in Section 7, how loyalty tasted like blood on your tongue. The memory coils in your chest as you lift your fork. Walt Jr. chimes in, enthusiastic. Dad, your mashed potatoes are epic. A tender moment. You taste buttery comfort, but the aftertaste of ammonia fumes still lingers on your palate. A mainstream physiological fact, humans can detect as few as 1 part per billion of ammonia in the air, a reminder that your lungs still carry every phantom sting from the lab. Historians still argue whether heightened senses serve as survival mechanisms or simply torment the afflicted, and right now each inhale feels like chewing on a lemon rind dipped in bleach. You take a bite and smile at Walt Jr., who grins back with braces flashing silver light. The familial ritual presses on, the clink of cutlery, the hum of the ceiling fan. Yet beneath it all, your mind races through midnight drives on empty highways, the RV's headlights carving tunnels through desert darkness. A fringe folklorist once claimed that desert roads at night are haunted by phantom motorists who vanish at dawn, Historians still debate whether those tales stem from isolation or simple exhaustion. Either way, you've driven that road twice and felt the presence of something watching. Skylar brightens the conversation. So, about the school fundraiser, can you help set up the chemistry demo? She glances at you knowingly, unaware how truly literal her request is. You swallow, tasting damp chalk, call back to Section 1's lab coat odor, and manage a laugh. Absolutely, you say, though you might as well be promising pyro at a fireworks factory. That's your first joke, a soft deflection in a sea of polished veneer. Walt Jr. chimes again with a question about birthdays. You launch into a gentle monologue, plotting surprise cakes and party games, each word a lifeline thrown into the family's world. Yet with every syllable, your guilt fractures like ice underfoot. You remember the acid buckets from Section 2, the hydrofluoric hiss, and wonder if the same hands that spoon carrots can also pour solvent. Scholars still argue whether compartmentalization is a coping mechanism or a moral collapse. Tonight, you teeter on that exact fault line. The dinner winds down. Skylar clears plates while you gather cups. The soft scrape of porcelain is almost musical, sensory detail that anchors you back into domesticity. Jesse slips in behind you, unnoticed, bearing a stack of school flyers. You startle. His silhouette, dark and hooded, feels like a callback from Section 9's suburban ruse. He slides the papers across the counter, eyes flicking to your cobalt-stained fingers. You meet his gaze. Fatigue and determination tangled in his expression. Without a word, he nods toward the back door, a silent signal for your next act. You follow him outside, leaving dirty dishes and reluctant normalcy behind. The night air is cool, scented with jasmine and distant desert winds. A mainstream botanical fact, jasmine's fragrance has been used in aromatherapy to induce calm since antiquity, yet tonight it only highlights your restless mind. Historians still debate whether scent-based therapy has measurable effects or is just placebo, and you suspect your nerves are proof of both. Jesse points to the car, your sedan, parked under a lone streetlight. You glance back at the house, windows alight, voices muffled. Skylar, Walt Jr., their world remains intact for now. In your grip is the canvas bag from Section 7, heavy with blue flames you can neither cook nor discard here. You probably won't survive this without facing the consequences of balancing family love and chemical ambition, but you square your shoulders and slip the bag into your jacket. The sedan's engine purrs as you pull onto the quiet streets. You ease through suburban lanes, headlights painting lawns in stroke-like arcs. Each mailbox, each trimmed hedge, reminds you of what you stand to lose. A fringe sociologist once claimed that anonymity in suburbia breeds secrecy. Historians still argue whether that secrecy is protective or destructive. You feel the tension of dual lives humming in your veins. You navigate to the edge of town where darkness swallows streetlights and the horizon unwinds into open desert. The moon's glow guides you like a silent overseer. Memories flicker, the adrenaline-soaked cook in Section 5, the patched reactor from Section 8, the blood bond in Section 7. Each has stretched your moral sinews until they're frayed and raw. You turn off the main highway onto a gravel road, the tires crunching under your weight. The sedan's shock absorbers groan with every rut. You probably won't survive this without regretting every mile, but the rush of control beckons. At the road's end, you park under a dead mesquite tree, its twisted silhouette a dark sentinel. You grab the bag and step into the desert's hush. The quiet is absolute, save for a distant coyote's yip. You unzip the canvas pouch and let the blue crystals spill onto a flat rock. They glimmer under the moonlight, tiny mirrors reflecting ambition and despair. You kneel, tracing the shards with a finger. A mainstream mineral fact, quartz crystals align in hexagonal lattices, creating clarity of structure. You wonder if your own moral lattice can withstand these fractures. Historians still debate whether structure precedes integrity or vice versa, and tonight you feel both vulnerable and unbreakable. Jesse crouches beside you, silent solidarity in posture if not in purpose. You scoop the crystals back into the bag, each movement deliberate. The night air tastes like possibility and betrayal. You stand, eyes on the desert horizon, heart beating in tandem with the coyote's echo. You probably won't survive this without shattering something beyond repair, but you ignite the engine and head back toward the family lights. Balancing dinner plates with solvent flasks, love with lies, you're walking a razor's edge. The road beckons, and you drive on, knowing that every secret mile adds another fracture to your moral core. Section 12. Boiling Point. You ease the RV into a deserted backroad, its headlights cleaving a path through mesquite shadows that sway like silent sentinels. You probably won't survive this without steeling your nerves, but tonight's volatility demands steely calm. In 1937, the Hindenburg disaster taught the world that even grandest ambitions can combust in seconds, a mainstream fact that hums through your mind as you park beneath a skeletal cottonwood. Historians still argue whether hydrogen was doomed by design or human error, and you feel the same duality in Tuco's unpredictable fury. Walt flicks off the engine, plunging you into silence so deep your heartbeat's drum seems loud enough to trigger alarms. Jesse slides open the side hatch, its hinges squealing like a wounded animal. You catch the tang of diesel and pine resin, sensory detail that melds makeshift chemistry with wilderness calm. A fringe forager once claimed pine sap can seal minor wounds. Don't test that wisdom on chemical burns, though. Your canvas bag rests on a fold-out table alongside empty coffee cups and scattered slide rule calculators. The table's metal legs tremble under the weight of recent history, bushel baskets of regret, bucket loads of risk. You reach for the blue crystals, fingertips brushing shards that glint like frozen lightning. A mainstream fact flickers. Crystalline meth's refractive index differs so sharply from glass that dealers once used polarized lenses to detect counterfeits. Historians still debate whether optics or chemistry spurred that practice, but you know those shards hold both purity and peril. Suddenly, the RV door slams. You whirl to see Tuco's hulking silhouette fill the threshold, nostrils flared and eyes burning like embers. You probably won't survive this without blurring into the shadows, but there's no hiding from a man who tests loyalty with nails and hammers. A fringe rumor among cartel circles says Tuco once carved respect into his own palms as a birthmark of allegiance. Historians still argue whether that was ritual or madness. He stalks forward, footsteps crunching over gravel. "You lied to me," he growls, voice low and jagged. His fury hangs in the air, thick as solvent fumes. Walt stands, expression unreadable. You feel the temperature spike in the cramped aisle, as if the RV itself braces for ignition. Tuco lifts the canvas bag by its drawstrings, tugging it downward until the crystals tumble onto the table. They scatter like blue hailstones. You stifle your first joke. This cook's meteor shower is less poetic and more suicidal. Each shard's glint mocks your ambition. "Where's the extra 50? Tuco demands, voice snapping. You recall the cut agreed upon in Section 6, 50 grand for a 5-pound run. Walt's eyes narrow, he steps forward. "We delivered what we promised," he says evenly. You sense the calm before a storm. A mainstream fact drifts. In maritime trade, disputes over cargo weight sparked countless mutinies, a historical echo that resonates here. Historians still argue whether greed or miscalculation tipped those ships, and right now you're between both currents. Tuco lunges, grasping Walt's collar. You reach out to intercede. Your second joke attempt fizzles into a gulp, because intervening with Tuco is like wrestling a live wire. He shoves Walt back. The RV lurches. Jesse scrambles, hand hovering near a duffel bag packed with improvised flashbangs, fringe weapon hacks he found on a guerrilla forum. Don't count on them working. Tuco snarls and cracks his knuckles, shards of blood-red light dancing in his pupils. The RV's shallow ceiling amplifies his growl into a predator's roar. You swallow, tasting copper tang from your own anticipation. Every muscle quakes with tension so thick you could slice it. Then Walt speaks, voice low but unwavering. You used our product 3 times the agreed purity, Tuco. That's your bonus. He gestures to the 5-pound containers labeled 100%. You watch to see if Tuco's madness will consume this logic. Tuco pauses, nostrils flaring as he sniffs. You hold your breath, expecting violence. Instead, his shoulders drop in a violent exhale. You son of a... he mutters, then laughs, a jagged, joyous tear in the night. Your third joke whispers at the edge of fear. If laughter is madness, then sanity here is optional. He scoops a handful of crystals and stuffs them into his jacket pocket. Family business, he declares, slapping Walt's shoulder so hard your spine tingles. But next time, you bring the money up front, or I bring the hammer. He cracks a grin that flickers malevolence and pride. The ice breaks. Jesse exhales, dropping his hand from the duffel. You collapse into a chair, the table's metal groaning. A mainstream chemical fact floats by. Adrenaline can heighten pain threshold up to 10-fold, explaining Tuco's earlier hammer test. Historians still debate whether pain rituals cement bonds or breed trauma, and you're living proof of both sides. Tuco claps his hands. We celebrate, he booms, fishing a flask of tequila from his coat. The liquid gleams amber, an invitation to chaos underpinned by camaraderie. He pours shots for all 3 of you. 5-second cheers, brass tang firing your nerves. You swallow, tasting desert oak and misplaced trust. Jesse grins, hoisting his shot. His eyes shine with a mixture of relief and dread. You join in, raising your glass to shadowed rafters. The tequila slides down like liquid courage, igniting a warmth that blurs fear into euphoria. After the toasts, Tuco pockets the crystals and strides out into the night, his silhouette spider-legging across the desert floor. The RV door thuds shut, and silence settles heavy as a lead blanket. You probably won't survive this without reckoning with how close you came to annihilation, but for now the adrenaline's lullaby hums through your veins. Walt exhales and sinks back, gaze distant. Jesse rubs his temples, eyelids fluttering. You flick on the RV's overhead light, its buzz a small comfort. You sweep the crystals into the canvas bag, each movement a reclaiming of agency. A fringe astronomer once posited that human bonds forged under duress shine brighter than those under calm skies. Historians still argue whether adversity builds unity or fractures it irreparably. You look at Walt and Jesse, ashes of fear glowing in their eyes, and sense your own fractured allegiance knitting anew. You shrink back into your seat as Jesse powers up the engine. The RV vibrates, ready to roll. The desert wind whispers through vents, remnants of cottonwood scent fading into exhaust. As the headlights flicker on, you glance at the scattered slide rules, coffee cups, and stubs of spent flashbangs. They lie like archaeological relics of a near-miss apocalypse. You probably won't survive this without gratitude, gratitude that purity and pride can coexist, however briefly. You grip the steering wheel, inhale the rumble beneath your hands, and push the RV into gear. Behind you, the cottonwood silhouette retreats into darkness, bearing witness to another chapter of calculated survival. Section 13, Calculated Showdown. You slide into the front seat as the RV's engine growls awake, the night's adrenaline still humming through your veins. Jesse's breathing rattles in the passenger side, unsteady as a ghost train on fraying tracks. You probably won't survive this without razor-sharp focus, but tonight demands more than heart, you need cunning. In 1928, penicillin's accidental discovery pivoted on a serendipitous mold spore spoiling bacterial cultures, a mainstream fact that reminds you how chance and chemistry can upend destinies. Historians still argue whether Fleming's triumph was luck or insight, and right now you lean on both. Tuco's strip mall lair retreats behind you in the headlights, its neon glare blinking like a wounded eye. Your fingers curl around the worn steering wheel, your talisman through every acid bath, reactor patch, and loyalty test. Jesse's gaze flicks to the canvas bag resting on the dash. You catch his fear. Tuco's threats to bring the hammer if you skimp on payment still echo in his bones. You remember the clatter of nails and blood from Section 7, and you steel yourself. There is no room for error now. The highway unwinds toward Albuquerque, the city lights glimmering like distant promises. You slide your hand into the bag, extracting a small vial of super-pure blue crystals. 99.6%, the apex of your desert alchemy. These shards are both shield and sword, proof you're worth every cent. A fringe rumor claims that competing cartels once tested meth purity by burning it on a spoon and timing flame color shifts. Historians still debate whether that method ever caught on or remained street myth. You tuck the vial into your jacket pocket, close enough to feel its cool mass. Jesse wipes a bead of sweat from his forehead. "How are we doing?" he rasps, voice thick with dread. You force a grin, your first joke, just like a bank heist, if the safe was full of crystal death. He manages a weak chuckle, though the humor tastes as bitter as residual solvent on your tongue. Ahead, the El Camino you commandeered earlier sits idling under a flickering lamppost. Its silhouette reminds you of the dunes in Section 3's desert aftermath, a lone carcass waiting for scavengers. Tonight, scavengers wear suits and carry clipboards. DEA agents will be on their trail soon if Tuco squeals. But right now, the only showdown that matters is at the hidden junkyard behind Los Palos Hermanos. You turn off the main road onto a gravel cutoff, tires crunching like bones underfoot. The city's hum recedes, replaced by wind whispering through twisted fence posts. You recall the cactus mosaic from Section 4 and the propane furnace in Section 8. In this makeshift frontier, you built a fortress of secrets. Now you steer toward a sanctuary where business can close on your terms. Jesse staggers behind you as you step into the junkyard's halo of halogen lamps. The skeletal remains of rusted Chevys and forgotten trailers line the perimeter. You spot Tuco crouched under the biggest neon sign you could pry free, a battered marquee that still flickers, "Motel." He grips a pistol, its grip worn like his temper. He stands as you approach, eyes swirling with expectancy. "Where's the money?" he snarls, voice echoing off dented hoods. Your heart hammers. This is the gauntlet you designed. You give him a measured nod and reach into your jacket. Out come stacks of freshly printed bills, enough to satisfy his cut for both major runs. You arrange them into neat bundles on an overturned oil drum. The bills smell of ink and promise. A mainstream economic fact: U.S. currency production reached 4 billion notes per month in the 2000s, each a testament to determined printing presses. Historians still argue whether tons of cash in criminal hands fuels growth or collapses markets, and here, bundled bills could spark either. Tuco's nostrils flare as he sniffs the air. His gaze snaps to the canvas bag next to the cash. You lift it and unscrew the vial's cap, tipping a few crystals into a curved spoon. The fragments tumble in sapphire arcs before settling into a tiny pile. You strike a flint lighter, flame licking the spoon's underside. A thin wisp of vapor curls upward. Tuco's eyes narrow, connoisseur instincts guiding him. He steps forward, examining the smoke's hue. You hold your breath. He snaps his fingers, and in a blur, presses the spoon to his nose. Eyes rolling back, he inhales deep, then exhales a low roar. Pure ecstasy or pure madness, you can't tell. He sweeps the spoon under his arm like a trophy. "You're cut," he booms, then nods at the cash. You slide one bundle across. He snatches it, fanning the notes in a triumphant display. Then he turns back to you, gaze piercing. "Now, the second part." You breathe steady. "We deliver the final shipment tomorrow," you say, voice calm as acetone in a cold lab. 5 pounds, same purity. He cranes his head, gauging your earnest. You produce the lab notes, tables of ratios, temperature logs, spectrometer readings, proof of process and precision. They're yellowed and smudged, but to a chemist they sing confidence. Tuco's grin splits his face, jagged as a serrated blade. "Show me." His pistol remains aimed, an ominous gestural flourish. You reach into the cache and pull out the slip of paper with the scheduled cooking site, BLM land, coordinates recorded in Section 1. You hand it to him. He unfolds the sheet, eyes flicking to your scribbles tracking completion times. Historian-style footnotes? No, but enough specificity to show you respect process. A mainstream cartographic fact: GPS accuracy improved to within 5 meters by 2005, making clandestine drop-offs more reliable. Historians still debate whether GPS doomed old-school dead drops, and here, your precision spares bullet drops. Tuco pockets your site plan. He taps the pistol butt against the drum, your makeshift altar of commerce. "Tomorrow," he affirms, voice low. "Same time." Then he sweeps his gaze over the junkyard, as if to curse every rusted fender for standing in his way. As you back away, Jesse flinches at the gun's proximity. You offer him a nod, silent reassurance that you passed the test. He exhales sharply, relief and fear mingled in one breath. You descend into the El Camino, engine growling to life. The drive home is quiet. The city lights reappear, soft halos in the night. You cradle the empty vial in your hand, its purpose fulfilled. You replay Tuco's roar, the flames hiss, the crisp snap of bills. Inside the RV, Jesse collapses onto the bunk, limp with exhaustion. You secure the doors and kill the lights. In the dim glow of the dashboard, you extract the remaining crystals. Just a pinch, enough to remind you of leverage when logic fails. A fringe strategist once claimed that holding a token of risk amplifies negotiating power. Historians still debate whether fear or respect drives outcome, and tonight you wield both. You settle beside Jesse, offering your shoulder. He leans in, seeking solid ground for his wavering faith. You whisper, "You're alive because of your purity and my plan." He nods, eyes closing. You rise and step outside into the cool desert air. You taste sagebrush and victory's afterglow. Behind you, the RV stands silent, your crucible, your confession booth, your battlefield. You probably won't survive this without tomorrow's final cook, but you've bent fate to your will tonight. Chemistry, cunning, and cash balanced on a spoon's edge. Section 14, No Rough Stuff Deal. You guide the RV onto the flat expanse of BLM land just before dawn, pale light stretching across sagebrush like a whispered vow. Jesse rubs his eyes, tracing the horizon where the sun's first rays bleed into the sky. You probably won't survive this without focus, but the final cook demands nothing less than unwavering precision. In 1970, clandestine labs began migrating from mobile rigs to remote fields, a mainstream fact that echoes your own strategy of secrecy by mobility. Historians still argue whether nomadic labs outpaced enforcement or simply spread risk, and tonight you stake your last 5 pounds on that gamble. Behind you, the RV's engine idles, its vibration humming through the mobile lab's insulated walls. You haul out your battered catalyst kit, flasks lined like soldiers awaiting orders. Jesse sets up the hot plates with deliberate care, each placement a callback to Section 5's first cook. The desert air tastes of cold anticipation, laced with diesel and pine. A fringe chemist once claimed that alpine air boosted reaction yields. Don't expect mountainous purity here, though. Walt kneels beside the digital scale, his gloved fingers poised. Remember, 99.5% or better, he murmurs, voice steady as a metronome. The scale ticks at 1.000 g of pseudoephedrine, spot on. Your first joke slips in quietly, zero margin for human error, just like astrophysics. Jesse manages a wry grin before returning to work. You pour heptane into the primary flask, the liquid's hiss slicing through morning stillness. A fringe tactic involves adding crushed vitamin C to sharpen crystal formation. Historians still debate its efficacy, but you bypass folklore for established ratios. You hold the flask under the hood, no duct tape this time, letting the initial heat touch the solvent. The reaction begins its slow climb in temperature. You monitor the dial, 80 degrees Celsius, 100 degrees C. Walt's digital thermometer flickers at 120 degrees Celsius. A mainstream fact. Industrial methylamine reactors cap at 130 degrees Celsius to prevent runaway byproducts. Historians still argue whether early labs adhered to such constraints or lived by instinct alone, and tonight you live by data. Jesse's hand hovers over a pipette, adding reagents with the precision of a jeweler setting diamonds. Each drop snaps into the mixture, causing tiny eruptions of foam. You recall Section 8's reactor patch fiasco and brace yourself. This time, the fume hood holds firm. The foam subsides, the solution clarifies to a pale straw hue. Your second joke emerges in a whisper. If chemistry were comedy, this would be a tight 5. Walt glances up, lips twitching at the corner. He repositions glass joints, ensuring airtight seals. The desert breeze rustles the RV's awning, scattering dust motes inside like a theater's confetti. You catch one on your glove, sensory detail grounding you in the moment. As crystals begin to form, you slide the flask into the cooling bath. The hiss of steam meeting ice water is a lullaby and alarm all at once. A fringe chemist's blog once touted dry ice slurries for sub-zero yields. Historians still argue about trade-offs between speed and purity, but you need time more than haste now. Walt checks the spectrometer. 99.7%, he announces, voice soft with relief. You exhale, feeling muscles unclench. This is more than chemistry, it's vindication. Jesse bags the crystals in labeled pouches. Final, Tuco. He places them in the canvas bag, their weight like a crown of thorns pressed to your chest. The sun peeks over mesa tops, gilding the RV in gold. You pack away glassware, each piece washed, dried, and stored, a ritual cleansing. A mainstream historical note, early 20th century moonshiners wiped barrels with vinegar to remove taint. You mirror that care, wiping flasks to remove all residue. Historians still debate whether such cleaning prevented chemical interference or was mere superstition. Jesse loads the cash briefcase, hefting it with a grunt. 50 grand, he breathes. You nod, payment owed, debt settled. The RV door closes, sealing the lab's secrets once more. In the back seat, Walt consults his lab notes, annotating yields and ratios. You watch him, remembering the pride he once had at gray matter. Now, that same brilliance fuels a darker empire. A fringe psychologist speculates that extremes of genius and desperation blur moral boundaries. Historians still argue whether circumstance or personality shapes destiny, and here, both hold true. You start the engine. The RV rumbles, ready for the last delivery of Season 1. The desert light floods the mobile lab, illuminating every sealed jar and hidden photocopy of state regulations. You probably won't survive this without scars, physical or spiritual, but you've honored your contract with precision and pride. As the RV rolls toward Albuquerque, the wind catches up dust in your rearview mirror. You glance once more at the canvas bag's bulge, knowing its contents will change everything. Section 15, Aftermath Secrets. You guide the RV down the final stretch of backroad, the early light of Albuquerque breaking over the horizon like a tentative promise. You probably won't survive this without stealing your resolve, but tonight's delivery will seal your season's fate. In 1880, remote stagecoach stations dotted the same terrain, serving travelers with fresh horses and guarded mail, a mainstream fact that underscores the enduring importance of supply lines. Historians still argue whether those outposts forged networks of progress or became targets for highwaymen, and you feel that duality as the city's skyline sharpens ahead. The strip mall where you first met Tuco in Section 7 appears ahead, neon wreckage still flickering, a rusted sign for mini-marts and pawnshops. Jesse grips the seat, knuckles pale. He knows the stakes, pure blue crystals in exchange for your empire's advance. You slip a hand into the canvas bag and extract a final pouch labeled Bulk, Heisenberg. The coarse texture of the ziplock against your palm reminds you how far you've come. Tuco's lair waits, doors wide and lights buzzing. The concrete block walls stand witness to your first test of loyalty and your countless trials under pressure. You remember the dangling nails, the blistered reactor from Section 8, the domestic masquerade in Section 9, and the rooftop confession in Section 10. Each memory sharpens your focus like a whetstone. You step inside, the staccato echo of your boots on cinderblock floors. Tuco lounges in his steel chair, veins pulsing like coiled springs. He snatches the pouch, tears it open, and dumps crystals onto a metal table. They tumble like blue hail against an urban battlefield. You hold your breath. He bags the crystals, fingers brushing shards that glint like midnight stars. 100% pure, he growls, voice low and reverent. A fringe myth among cartel circles claims some cooks dilute batches with powdered sugar and still con local buyers. Historians still argue whether such frauds ever lasted beyond whispers. Here, your integrity stands unblemished. Tuco leans forward, pinning you with his gaze. You earned your place, he says, the words rumbling like distant thunder. He pockets the pouch and slaps a new duffel of cash onto the table, heavy, crisp, humming with possibility. You slide it aside, resisting the urge to count it twice. A mainstream economic fact, cash in $100 bills weighs about 1 gram per note. Your haul could tip the scales of dozens of backpacks. Historians still debate whether paper money's heft anchors its value or merely burdens its bearers. He stands and extends a massive hand. You clasp it, steel meeting steel in a pact sealed by commerce and risk. The joints pop in your knuckles as you release your grip. Jesse exhales, relief flooding his features. Tuco grins, eyes gleaming. Season's over, he declares. Tell Heisenberg I'll be waiting for the next one. You nod. The implication is clear. This is not the end, but a comma in your story, not a period. You step back into the RV, windows fogging in the sudden shift of climate. You organize the cash into piles, operating funds, medical reserve, family safety net, a triage of your divided loyalties. You probably won't survive this without reconciliation of these forces, but you draw lines in the sand with every folded bill. Jesse sinks onto the bunk, exhaustion and exhilaration tangled in his posture. You offer a wordless nod, no jokes now, only solidarity. He sinks into a restless sleep. You sit at the driver's seat, steering wheel warm beneath your hands. The city lights drip past, Ticarius flickering on, workers blinking awake. The RV lab's hum is a lullaby and a threat. A fringe strategist once suggested that success in high-risk ventures hinges on controlling narrative as much as numbers. Historians still argue whether perception or product drives legacy, and tonight you craft both. You inhale the desert air tainted with urban exhaust, tasting ozone and petrol. You glance at Walt's worn lab coat draped over the seatback, a reminder of beginnings, of sacrifices made in the name of survival and supremacy. The RV emerges onto the highway, its headlights carving lines into the night. Behind you, Tuco's lair recedes into shadows, your dominion's cost paid, the blue empire's seed planted. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the engine's rhythm steady your pulse. The weight of the pouch in your pocket is both burden and boon. You probably won't survive this without questioning what next season demands, but for now you hold triumph in trembling hands.